I think one that is, man, hits you hard, and I know it's going to hit you hard. Boromir in The Fellowship of the Ring. Never mind, it's not going to hit you hard. He's the guy, he's Sean Bean.
Lord of the Ring? Hang on.
You don't know who Boromir, Sean Bean in Lord of the Rings. One cannot simply walk to Mordor. He's a pencil holder for arrows.
Forgive me.
You did not just call him a pencil holder for arrows, bro. You can't just say that.
Did you hear that?
You cannot
Hang on.
just simply call
I'm looking at a picture of him pegged with arrows in his chest.
Yeah! One of the best death scenes in all of cinema.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's genius. I'm stealing that. You can't call him a pencil holder.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One-Eyed Film Podcast. I'm your host Seth Mossberg, and we are here with my best man, quite literally. I asked Josh to be my best man in my wedding, so that's happening, and so we are stoked to bring you this episode today. It's going to be very exciting.
We're excited about death.
Yeah!
Yeah.
No. I think we have some interesting topics to bring to you regarding this. We've mentioned we wanted to do this type of episode for a while because it comes up often, especially in the movies that we choose to cover. And I think it's interesting to dissect it and figure out what's wrong with it, what can we learn from it, and stuff like that. So I think one reason that we talk about it so much is we talk about sequels and lack of creative ideas. And especially when it comes to multiverses and bringing characters back. We'll dissect this. I kind of have my structure that I've analyzed. I know it sounds very nerdy, but it's
okay. We're nerds around here.
We are nerds. But actually, are we geeks? I forget. Will had something about nerds and geeks.
Yeah, Gerds is what he had.
There is a desire to always bring back the thing that's popular. And the thing that's popular is usually a character. Now, that often presents itself in how? If you want to have the stakes of somebody dying, then what is the tension? If you don't have the possibility of dying, then there's no tension. If somebody dies but they come back, then there's no really problem with them dying because you know death is impermanent. So you either create a situation that's impossible, where death is impossible, that's the invincible person, or just there's no chance of them dying because they have too much plot armor, or you just know that it could be reconciled, I guess, and turned back on itself. And we're really seeing this with Marvel, and that's where most of this conversation stems from. Because of the multiverse and what Marvel has introduced, you can just grab somebody from another universe and have them take the place of another person. Now, it hasn't happened as specifically as that, but with Loki and with Doctor Strange and all these characters traveling the multiverse, you could easily just go get a new Tony Stark and bring him to your universe. And I want to discuss the limitations of that, because that's obviously the pinnacle of Endgame, and how they took a Infinity Stone from a different universe, used it, and then brought it back, supposedly. So is that okay? And any other type of multiverse problems are not okay? Like, there's many different aspects to this, and the multiverse plays a big part of it, but I also have other solutions that we're going to talk about. But what are your thoughts on death in movies?
I think it is a great way to add depth to a story, but it's not required. I think a lot of movies nowadays think that it's required, so they'll kill off a character so that they can add a little bit of oomph to an emotional part of the story, but then they'll just bring the character back because, oh, well, I actually needed that character. It just seems like storytelling nowadays has gotten a little bit careless with the use of death, where it doesn't really have as much meaning in a lot of movies as it does.
You're right. It's meaningless. And as we discuss the biblical ramifications of that, why is it a problem that stories are bringing people back from the dead, and yet our Savior came back from the dead, and even for us, death is impermanent? So maybe I'm jumping the gun too much, but why, as we continue to talk about this in movies and stories, why do we have a problem with this? And yet we don't have a problem with our own biblical story of Christ rising from the dead, defeating death for all. And Christ has already won over death. And if we put our trust and faith in him, then we will still die, but we will live forever instead of eternal death in hell. So yeah, why is that good and movies are bad?
I think from my perspective, the way that I like to think about it is Jesus' death was so necessary to give death no power. Because in that story, Jesus died so that he could conquer death and show that he is the God of everything. There's nothing that's below him. And when he conquered death, he gave us a reason to not fear death. And there, it wasn't so much that he died, it was that he was taking away the power of basically everything that everyone was scared of, especially then, because they didn't really have the same sort of hope for an afterlife that we do. They had an understanding that that's what God's plan was, or at least a lot of the prophets did, but here it was just a huge change for what everyone had been living, like in a fear of like trying to live a good life because you need to be perfect in order to get to heaven, but no one can do that. So it's just this constant battle of trying to be perfect and then die, and then the significance of that death was like, well, I can't conquer death alone. Like, nothing's going to get me past that barrier into eternal life. And Jesus really is the reason that we have, as Christians, a reason to not see death as a very significant adversary.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite verses, just because of how powerful it is and how I believe Paul probably got riled up when he was thinking of this, but 1 Corinthians 15:54 and following. When the perishable has been clothed with imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will become true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ.
I can see him in a cell. Wait, that's from 1 Corinthians, so he would have been in a cellar, right?
I don't know, you're at the Bible college.
You're right. Wherever Paul was writing that, I can picture him putting his pen down and like, careful, it's on fire.
And that one, I don't know. I don't think that language had punctuation, but thanks be to God at the very end has an exclamation point in our Bible. So I don't know if that was just like Paul was like, yeah, you take that death. Jesus won the battle, not you. Get wrecked, son.
As a messenger was reading that that letter to the Corinthians or the church, I can imagine just an audible ooh. in the audience.
You know what I bet someone said? Bars. Yeah.
They had to.
Oh, but back to our conversation.
So death has no significance for us, but that doesn't mean that in a movie we can treat it insignificantly, because it is one of the biggest part of our lives. The ending of our lives. But does that mean that it should be the end? That's in a movie standpoint. Does that mean death has to be the last time we see that character?
Yeah. And on that note, I have written out different solutions that story writers will use when it comes to a character coming back, and some problems that face the story when they bring a character back. So the first one is probably the least
used, I'd say.
Not least used, least powerful, even though it's very powerful. I call it the invincible solution, and that's not the show. That's just the character is invincible. Characters like Kingpin and Darth Maul, which I know you want to talk about Darth Maul.
I do.
I have a gripe with all of these, but especially with the invincible solution. I don't think that you can have an invincible character well without giving them a very strong weakness. A strong weakness doesn't make any sense. But when I think of Kingpin and Darth Maul, I can't immediately think how to kill them. Now, they have died in stories. Darth Maul, spoiler alert, he died in Rebels. But he also didn't die in The Phantom Menace. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But Kingpin, I've expressed thinking about Echo and thinking about Daredevil Born Again. He's just invincible. Like, in Hawkeye, when Kate shoots him in the chest with an arrow, he just breaks it off. There's a difference between a physically strong character and an invincible character. So he breaks off the arrow, he gets shot in the eye, and then he's back in Echo with just a little ouchie wouchie.
A little understatement on the battle scar, but yeah.
But that's pretty much all it is it's scarred, he can still see out of it. Like, maybe the comic nerds can correct me in the comments, but I don't know how to kill Kingpin. And Darth Maul is a little easier, but it's like he's still got sliced in half, and rage itself was what kept him alive after falling down the pit, and then they made him robotic legs. I haven't watched the Clone Wars. I will. I want to. It looks like a lot of fun. But that seems like such a lazy piece of writing to, yes, bring back a cool character who I believe was underutilized in The Phantom Menace, but I still think it's lazy. Like,
yeah, I agree. I think those both are great examples of this because Kingpin, it feels like just lazy writing. It really does. Because they're like, well, who's going to be our bad guy for Echo? We got to bring him back, you know? So
we got to use him in every single part of our marketing so that people will even consider watching this show.
Exactly. They're really desperate for some sort of big character to be in their show because Kingpin was like a huge part of a lot of different stuff. Kingpin was like, he had his fingers in a lot of different stories, like within Spider-Man, I'm thinking of. Like, he was like he was a crime lord, and he had a lot of money going in a lot of different places, which gave him a lot of story. So killing that character off, they lost a lot of branches to other possible stories, and I think they realized that. So they brought him back, just lazy writing, because they feel like they messed up when they killed him. Then again, we didn't see him die.
I still have beef
I
with
hate that reasoning.
Part of it is a lack of careful planning. We've seen that with Phase 4 and 5 of Marvel. If you have the most you could possibly get out of your story with that character, that's when you decide when to kill him off. Until then, don't kill him off. Unless you have something bigger and better already planned, or just nothing planned. Just stop the series, stop the story. So,
and can I add one real quick thing to that? Another thing is you can't use all of the character and then kill it off. Or kill them off, because you need to have a little bit of use for them to have a significance in them dying. Because you can like have a character do a lot of stuff and they're super useful, but then at the end of where they feel like, oh, okay, you aren't really needed for us anymore, boom, gone. Where they kind of just fade off and die. They need to have hope for other stuff for it to really be a significant death.
I would say an example of that is Logan. Not the hope for more, but that his story was pretty much over. Now, obviously, there's way more Wolverine stories you could have told,
yes.
But I think after all of the X-Men movies, they were pretty satisfied. And yet, we'll get to this in the multiverse solution. He's still coming back in Deadpool 3. Let's hold off on that for a second. But if you were just to look at the X-Men 1 movie till Logan, that's kind of the arc of Logan and being satisfied with how much story he's been able to bring into the studios.
Yeah. And I guess the point that I was also trying to make there for like having a character still have some use left, or at least have like hope for more stuff that character would do, it would probably have to be a good guy, because you can't have a bad guy, have him go through his whole plan, still have plans left, and then kill him off. I feel like a bad guy should get all of his use of the character, and then he's gone. Like, everything you have done, it doesn't matter, because good beats evil.
So you're saying that there needs to be a little bit of hope that there could have been more, and then therefore there's a loss that you feel because you're missing out on what could have been.
Yeah. Like, one example of someone dying where it feels like they've gotten the whole use out of it, and the character's death, like, it's not so much of a death actually at all, but like just the loss of the character doesn't feel super like they died, but Captain America after Endgame. Now, I know he didn't die, he just grew old, but it feels like they really did get all of the use out of the character, and then he's gone. So it just doesn't feel like it's really a complete story, if that makes sense. And I'm not complaining about that at all. I think Captain America's story ended amazingly. But if you want someone to die and have it be sad and like remorseful, to get that emotion, they need to have hope for more. Like Captain America would have had to die on the path or something.
Yeah. And let's rope in other types of stories, because I think what we're kind of getting at is one that I still don't know if it's a spoiler or not, because people kind of still think it's such a new game that it's still a little spoilery. So spoiler warning for The Last of Us Part 2. Do you think that Joel was a good example of what you're describing, of you didn't expect it, there could have been more? I mean, the whole fandom kind of thinks that.
Yeah. A lot of people like to hate on The Last of Us Part 2, but I think The Last of Us Part 2 killed Joel off, giving you as much emotion as possible, which gave you so much justification for going all the way to Seattle as Ellie. And I think they did a great job with Joel's character. Now, did I wish that he died later? Yes. But I still think that there was just so much hope that there was so much you still wanted to do with Joel, and then it's stripped from you. Like, you, as the person, you wanted to play as Joel. You wanted to, like, experience more of him, because that's why you probably went back to The Last of Us. And then it's taken away. So you feel as much sadness for Joel's death. Arguably, probably not as much as Ellie, because, I mean, she went all the way to Seattle for him. You also, just playing as Ellie, you're like, I'm so sad about this. Like, I'm angry in sadness that they killed Joel. And I think that's a great example of company, or
Studio.
of a studio killing off a character and then still having like a lot of possible use for that character left, and it having a lot of effect.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. But we've kind of strayed from the Invincible solution. I want to hear your thoughts on Darth Maul, because you have said multiple times that you really, really, really like the way they did Darth Maul. And I like it because I know he's a strong character in Clone Wars and Rebels. But I don't like the in-between of Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars, where he just kind of, I'm here again.
It's probably not a very great reason. I genuinely just think Darth Maul is so cool that him coming back, and like just the story of how he came back, just filled with so much anger and rage that's what kept him alive. I'm like, okay. And the fact that he had a double-sided lightsaber too, the only character with that also helps. He was just such a cool character that I wanted to see more of, like, as a fan. Now, it's been years since I've seen the Clone Wars, so I don't quite remember the whole story, but him coming back, it was, as a kid, it was just awesome to see the like one of my favorite Star Wars characters again. So, is Darth Maul's resurgence in the story very sound? No. Is it cool? Very much so, yes. And that's why I think it's an exception, only because Darth Maul is too cool to keep dead. That's it.
I think you're right, and the studios definitely see things the way you are. There was definitely an emotional connection to having Obi-Wan and Darth Maul continuously be in this battle over the course of so many years.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't think George was thinking about any sort of animated TV show when he was making The Phantom Menace. So he was just like, oh, this is a one-off villain. He's going to die, and that's it. But think about the person who watched Star Wars, whatever order, chronological or release order or whatever, and then they go and see Solo. They have not watched the Clone Wars or Rebels or really keep up with Star Wars, except that they've watched the movies. And then they go see Solo, a meh movie, but then Darth Maul shows up. They are very confused because they have not watched the Clone Wars, and they don't know that Darth Maul is even alive. Now, I'm sure there's not many people who fit that description, but I still think that was Star Wars turning into the grand TV show of, you need to have watched this before you watch this. So,
and I think having that requirement for TVs, for movies, works in trilogies, where you have to watch the first two in order to watch the last one. Once it starts becoming like Marvel has done, where you have to watch so much in order to even enjoy one movie, it's no longer fun. And I think Solo is kind of what ruined Star Wars universe in that way, for anything future to come out. Anything in the future to come out.
Yep. As I said right at the beginning, making your character invincible is not good storytelling unless they have a weakness. Even Superman has a weakness. But when I watched Black Adam, for example, I don't think anything could really defeat him. He was defeated by simply being okay with a deal that he made with the good guys. I mean, it makes for a very cool character, but it's not practical. The invincibility is too much of a power when it comes to superheroes or just plot armor where characters won't die. I think Daredevil does the opposite of this, which is funny because Kingpin is apparently invincible by what I've described. But Daredevil and Matt Murdock, he's fighting and he's getting wounded. He's still human, and he needs recovery time and he needs to heal and all these things, and that makes it more grounded. And that's something that Netflix shows could do easier with their TV-14 rating rather than a PG-13 rating that most superhero movies have. And even Deadpool has the same problem of always healing from whatever he's injured by, and so how do you really kill Deadpool? That's kind of the ultimate example of it, but that is his character. That is okay because that is his character, is like he then has depression and he wants to die. He's not meant to live forever. We're not meant to live in this human form in torment in this sinful world, and yet he is, and he hates it, and he can't die. That is his moral dilemma. But if you just make your character invincible and not address it and just say, oh yeah, they can never die, then there's no stakes. That's the whole point of why we're talking about this, is because there's no stakes when death is irrelevant.
Yes, you said it really well. Like when you go into a scene, there needs to be a fear of someone could die here. There's another thing of being invincible. There's also a lot of stories that just have tons of plot armor. I think you said that a while back, where you're like, I know this person can't die because they're in the trailer for the next movie or something like that. And a good example of this I also think of is Red Dead Redemption 2. John Marston, you think he's dead after one of the heists, but then you're like, wait, hold up. I'm literally playing him in the supposed sequel of this, which is actually the first Red Dead Redemption, but you're like, wait, hang on. He can't be dead. So there's a lot of confusion there, like how did they just kill him off? So he's coming back, and that's like the definition of plot armor. And I think it can be used really well like Red Dead Redemption, but you're still taking out a lot of the uncertainty of a character like being able to stay alive. And there's no sitting on the edge of your seat when you know the character is going to survive, which also kind of makes death a little insignificant because there's no chance for it.
Well, in that same vein, the same thing happened with Nick Fury recently with Secret Invasion. Secret Invasion was coming out very, very soon at a certain point, and then they released a trailer for the Marvels. The first trailer for the Marvels came out, and Nick Fury was in it, and we were like, well, now we know that he's going to survive Secret Invasion. And it's not that big of a spoiler. They chose to put it out. They knew what they were doing, but when characters like that are so close in with their releases that it's just like, well, the stakes are gone.
Or another thing I think Marvel fell to is also knowing how long someone's contract lasted.
True.
Which is also kind of plot armor where you're like, oh, this person actually has a whole nother movie with Marvel, so they can't die this one.
Yeah. Well, think about characters like Killmonger. Let's say he had a 2-movie contract. Michael B. Jordan had a two-movie contract. He's not coming back in Black Panther 2, but he was there in a dream sequence. So I don't think that was the case because they knew that they were going to kill Killmonger. Yeah. But yeah, that is a good point. And that's just the problem of being in the real world. You can't be completely spoiler-free with those types of things. Like you'll get set photos, you'll get script leaks and all that.
So Red Dead Redemption 2 was my example for plot armor where it's like, okay, I know this character's not going to die. Whereas there's the opposite where there's absolutely no plot armor. Top Gun Maverick, I was on the edge of my seat towards the end because I'm like, these guys could die. This could be the end of the story. And when Maverick tells Rooster to pull the chute, you're like, hang on, no, this can't be how it ends. This can't be. Until what's-his-face shoots the other plane down. You actually think that, hold on, Maverick could die here. This isn't cool.
I was actually listening to our past episode, which I think it was episode 2. It was pretty fun to listen to how much we've changed since then. But we were talking about how many fake outs there were in Top Gun Maverick and how many times it seemed like somebody was going to die. And that might have been where this initial concept for this episode came from, is the when you know everyone's going to survive. Now, you didn't know that in Top Gun Maverick, but by the end it was like, okay, well, no one actually died except for the bad guys. So the first time I saw it, when the one character started to go into G-Lock and he started passing out and you could see his vision fading and Mav was trying to wake him up with the alarm. And especially when he woke up, saw the hillside, pulled up on his joystick, and you just see him go behind a hill. That was a moment where I was like, I could see a fireball behind the mountain, and it could actually, like, he could actually die because he was enough of a side character that he could have died and not really. Like, if that happened to Rooster, I was like, oh, he's not going to die because he's got to have his redemption arc. But at least with that character, he was close enough to death that it was like, oh, this could actually happen. It didn't. But that was stakes that at least I thought in the moment were big and great. And that was the point of the whole movie is Maverick was trying to get everyone home alive and not have to go tell their parents that they don't have a son anymore because of some stupid maneuver that Maverick was trying to pull. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think death needs to have significance in order for there to be a lot of emotion or a lot of draw towards the story, to get your eyes locked on the screen. That's kind of what's fun about some of those movies, is because death is scary in those ones. And I think Top Gun Maverick does a great job at that.
Even how they continued on with the story of Goose and how that affected Maverick for so long. The significance of his death. I mean, it's set in our world. It's not like there's a possibility of resurrection, but that is exactly why Top Gun Maverick was so intense, is because he felt guilt for Goose's death and had to kind of make it up to Rooster. So that was the driving force. It meant something. And speaking of resurrection, that is my next solution that storytellers use. And I don't have any example. I couldn't think of any examples, because having a full resurrection scene or just somebody who you see is dead and then come back to life has been used, but it also kind of gives them a God complex. And that's just what we were talking about earlier, of like, that's kind of reserved for my man Jesus.
Yeah. Thing I can think of that is Mercy from Overwatch saying heroes never die, and then they res the character. That was the only thing I could think of. I actually can't think of an example of that in a movie.
I have the perfect example of resurrection in a movie.
Okay.
Because somehow Palpatine returned.
Okay.
Yes.
That is-
Palpatine.
that's-
Palpy. There's Palp
Palpatine is not a...
There's Palp in the orange juice.
I got you a meme for Instagram for this episode when it comes out. There's
Okay.
Palp in the orange juice.
It's just Palpatine's face. Palpatine is one that came out of nowhere. And we talked about this in the Star Wars episodes, that we always thought that maybe Palpatine actually didn't die after he was thrown down the chute.
Just gotta stay away from shoots, man. Don't let your bad guys go down there, because Darth Maul and Palpatine, that's... If I had a nickel for every time a bad guy fell down a chute or some sort of giant cavern and then didn't die, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's really weird that it happened twice.
Well, what if it's not just bad guys? What if it's just characters and you add Luke in episode 5 to that? Remember when he's in Cloud City and he falls out?
I'd have 3 nickels. Gonna go get me a piece of gum.
We didn't really expect Palpatine to actually come back, and then he did, and it was so lame. And so that's an example of meaningless, just explaining it away by resurrection and not actually caring about what impact it has in the story.
Another example of just poor story writing, just like Kingpin. It's like, it just feels like a way to get a good bad guy back on the screen, when in reality what people really want is we want a new good bad guy. Why just write in a new one? Like, maybe Palpatine somehow had a son with his looks. I don't know.
Well, apparently he did have a son, and then his son had a daughter, and her name was Rey.
See, that's stuff that I didn't even know, because I quit paying attention. I didn't even pay attention.
It's the whole point of episode 9.
I went to 2 of them in theaters, and I was on my phone for half of it. I kid you not. It just was that bad. So I just know that I was annoyed when she said, "I am Rey Skywalker."
Yeah. Breaking news: Rey is Rey Palpatine, and means that he had a kid, and that kid had a kid, and that's Rey. Anyways, we're gonna move on from that garbage. Resurrection is reserved for Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And not in addition to often attributing it to lazy storytelling, I think I feel different about it because the only self-resurrection is supposed to be Jesus, and that actually happened. That's not just a fake story. Now, we will be resurrected in our glorified bodies, but that's different. And so it's lazy, and I see it as disrespectful. But I'm not going to hold those writers to a standard that they don't hold themselves to. The time travel solution. This one is...
I've never seen Terminator.
You've never seen Terminator?
You're going to have to...
I've never seen Terminator either, but I know, like, I've watched recaps, I've watched, like, summaries of the movies, and I know that the fandom of Terminator has become very frustrated with how many time resets there have been. Or not even resets, just no one knows what the main storyline is, the main timeline. And so they keep going back and trying to fix, like, that is the time travel paradox of, can you go back and fix the past so that you don't create your present, which is their future. But there's a great video by The Critical Drinker that I actually posted in our Discord, and I'll link it in the description, about why modern movies suck. And part of it is the insignificance of death. I watched it right before this episode because we were going to talk about it. And he said the Terminator sacrifice in, I believe, T2. It might have been in Terminator 1, but it was definitely in T2. So that's, I think, the one where with the fiery thumbs up as he melts. That happens multiple times in the future movies, and it's not as significant anymore. It doesn't mean anything because it keeps happening, because you keep that Terminator dies, and then you go back in time or you're in a different timeline, and it's happening all over again, pretty much, and then ending the same way. Somehow there's a bunch of lava in all these movies that it's not always lava. It's not always lava. Forgive me, Terminator fans, if I'm explaining the movies wrong. I have never watched them. The time travel solution is just a way to bring back characters that should have just... I'm not discrediting time travel as an okay, or as a wrong way to write a story, because there can be some interesting stuff from that. Especially, I watched Looper recently with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It was actually an interesting concept of paradoxes of how to do time travel. But the Terminator series definitely struggles from it. I don't know if you have any other examples, but going back in time to either take somebody or to change something so that somebody's not dead. And whichever solution a writer uses to bring a character back, it's only to get that character back. Like, they know that actor is big money for their movie. They know that putting them in the trailer, even if it's a dream sequence even, is going to get seats in the theater. And that's really what it's all about. Like we're going to do an episode, probably not soon because we have a long list of things to do, but the downfall of the DC universe and how a lot of it was attributed to Warner Bros. Executives being greedy and needing the movies to meet certain parameters in order to make money. Sometimes you have a great creative idea and then the studio comes in and says, well, we need it to be under 2.5 hours so that we can fit more shows in theaters. We need it to include this person so that it makes more money. We need you to not include this person because they're not going to make us enough money or they're going to drive people away. Like things like that mess everything up. But I don't want to discredit time travel if it has its place in the story.
Any use of bringing a character back can be effective. You just can't be lazy with it, because if you are lazy with it, you start taking away the significance of death. And it's important for that. That's the whole point of this episode. There needs to be significance in death to get you invested into a story. Otherwise, it just feels like lazy storytelling, and you just want to bring a character back just so that you can play around with them in the story for a bit.
And I think we talked about this last week. Not you and I, but Isaac and Zach and I talked about this last week with How to Train Your Dragon, and how, man, the willingness to lose something or to make those characters lose something. Immediately, we have Toothless losing a wing, and that's part of the story building of how Hiccup helps him. At the end of the first movie, Hiccup loses his leg in battle. Like it's not necessarily a pivotal moment where he now has to deal with being an amputee. But it's meaningful. Yeah. It's sad. It's like, oh, my boy. And then in the second movie, again, spoiler alert, because we don't know who's seen these movies or not, Stoic dies.
They've had time. They've had so much time.
Stoic dies in the second one. And it's so sad because you know that death is permanent. They are willing to give up the father figure in order to explore that story of what it means to... Hiccup's lived without his... I know we should have said this last week. Hiccup's lived his whole life without his mom, thinking she was dead. They reunite. It's so beautiful. And the moment that he has a whole family again, his father dies in the battle. And now he's just left with no father and just a mom. Like, that's such a shift, and that's what they explore in those movies.
And back to my point of there needing to be hope for, like, more to do with that character. You're like, the family's finally back together. We can live a life. There's so much hope to have a complete family there. That you're like, everyone's back. Let's just rejoice for a bit, and then it's just taken away from you. And there's just so much hope, and then it's just gone. And that's why Stoic dying there is so significant, because you know that the death there, it's permanent. You know that there's no chance for them to come back, but you want them there so much because you want the family to be complete. And I love How to Train Your Dragon. That's got to be like top 10 movies. All three of them, top 10.
Has Tag moved out of your podium yet?
You know what moved in? What moved in? Mrs. Doubtfire. Mrs. Doubtfire. And Tag is probably still up there, but I watched it again the other day, and Mrs. Doubtfire is funnier. I also love Robin Williams, so... Yes.
I feel like you're the type of person who would try and start a Tag thing at your college to try and have a constant tag going on.
I've mentioned it so many times. I was debating playing it with a few friends that I know live in Minnesota, but we live like so far away that to where it would be a hassle to go and tag someone, but I think it could work. I think we can do it.
Some mentions, I just want to talk about some inspiration for movie deaths that actually meant something. Mufasa in The Lion King.
4-year-old didn't know it, but that was one of the saddest scenes I had ever seen. As a kid, I watched it on VHS, and I remember I'd always rewind it so that I could see him alive again, and then I'd go back and I'm like, wait. So I'd reverse it again to try and see Mufasa alive again.
It's interesting that they're making a sequel, or more of a prequel. A sequel to the live-action Lion King, where Simba is telling his son about his father's adventures. So they're still bringing back Mufasa, but not in the actual story. It's a dream sequence, which I think is a little more forgivable.
The death of a character being very significant.
We'll talk about The Hobbit some other time, because it's love-hate with how those stories were written. But in the context of just The Hobbit as The Hobbit, without story, without Lord of the Rings, whatever, without the books, or without Lord of the Rings or whatever, the sacrifice play on Thorin's part was very, very heartwarming and sad. We'll talk about more examples here in a second, but I want to get to my final solution, which has been the plague of bringing characters back. The multiverse solution. The multiverse just shows that you can bring anyone from anywhere. This is similar to the time travel one, and we kind of already talked about this, but being able to just take somebody from anywhere and have them replace another character that you already know and love, that's not good. That's not creative. That's lazy. That falls under lazy writing. And when you set the multiverse to be infinite, that's not, we can't comprehend that. We are finite beings, and especially when you start having these infinite possibilities, sometimes they're fun with shows like What If, but when it affects the main storyline, it's lazy. And when there's no more stakes for death and no more stakes for like a city's destruction. That was the first Avengers movie. It was New York was going to be wiped out and then Loki was going to take over the Earth. Like usually it's the world being taken over, but as we've gone into this multiverse phase of the stories, it's turned into, oh, the whole multiverse is going to fall apart if we don't save this or kill this villain. That's not possible for our brains to comprehend. Like we still are trying to justify it in our minds of how can we make a finite number out of this infinite possibility. The drinker said in his video, which again, link in the description, when you no longer have stakes with death, the stakes must be raised to astronomical levels of universe-ending situations which we are not meant to comprehend. It's frustrating.
That trillions will die, but we just can't comprehend that. It's like, okay, well, trillions can't die, so where's the risk? We know good's going to overcome evil here.
Then it becomes too much for the story. If trillions are actually going to die, then there's not going to be any more story. I think they played it well in Endgame with the half the universe dying. And that was kind of a comics thing, of course. But that wasn't universe ending. It was miserable for 6 years. But that's the whole reason Endgame happened, is because they wanted to bring those people back. Which does that cause a whole other problem with resurrection? But I think that's part of the value of life that the Avengers have, of knowing that those people die. Like not even just the people on Earth, like all over the universe, people died and people were blipped, and they know that wasn't just. And we'll do our deep dive on Endgame in a later episode. Again, promising future episodes.
Yeah, gotta stay tuned. Can't get away from us. We're too full of content.
Content.
For one, I keep praising this movie because there's just so much to praise with it. But one example that I think kind of takes away the multiverse sort of ability to bring a character back, or to kind of get rid of the insignificance of death, is the Spider-Verse world's ability to like take away from this multiverse situation. Because the multiverse exists there's so many Spider-Men, the ability to like bring a character back isn't like, you can't just go to another world, grab that character, bring him back. Because how did they would it? The atoms from one universe aren't too jazzed to be in a second one, where they start glitching all over. I forget the line. I thought it was funny. Yeah. The idea of items being jazzed is just a weird phrase to me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that way of doing it. But still, when you have a multiverse, I feel like there's a lot of laziness in saying like, oh, this story isn't actually the real one. Anyways, kind of what Star Wars is doing too, where it also becomes like, is this actually even the main storyline anymore?
I think one way we saw this explored was in Multiverse of Madness, which kind of had some good stuff to say about it, actually, with Wanda missing her children, wanting to see them, and so she just goes to another universe. Her intentions were more evil and wanted to kidnap them, and so she was going to go take the place of the other Wanda so that she could have that motherhood that she lost in WandaVision, which she created for herself in WandaVision. So she went to a universe where it actually happened. That whole thing got weird and convoluted, but Doctor Strange made it a point to say, you can't just do that. You're taking away the other person's children. You're taking away her opportunity to be a mother and all that. We talked about that a little bit.
I think just one of the biggest problems that I have with any sort of multiverse is that it just makes it way too complex for a story. You like to... I think Marvel has kind of fallen into this, where stories start to become confusing and difficult to understand when you have multiple universes, and the ability to bring a character from one universe in just to kind of have a character be brought back, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, they could probably bring back Iron Man, but it's just some other universe's Iron Man, and I'm not a fan of that. And then kind of similarly, the TV show of The Flash, which is technically time travel, yes, but in that story it feels more like a different universe, even though there's also a Flash multiverse, where they just bring the character who played the Reverse Flash for the first season. He gets brought back many times. I guess I shouldn't say many times. He gets brought back from another universe so that they can keep that character in the show. But he's not the same person, so it just feels a little bit different. I'm okay with that use of bringing the character back, but it still just feels like later on it just starts to get to be way too confusing for one storyline. And I think only Christopher Nolan is able to make a multi-level story and have it able to fit together well.
Well, you said Nolan, and I thought of Tenet. That still makes sense, even if it's a paradox. Like, he makes sure the rules of the universe are followed. One example I thought of with, I guess we should have talked about this with time travel, but it is also multiple universes. They kind of go hand in hand. Loki, which is interesting because Loki, the 2 seasons of Loki are good. I'll say that. Some people really like them. Some of them really don't like them. But
I'm on the fence.
But the fact that the Avengers went and had Hulk take the stairs, and Tony was there taking the Infinity Stone, and then Loki steals the Infinity Stone and branches off in his own timeline into his own show. That's a different Loki. That created a show that was pretty good. But it's a different Loki. It wasn't the Loki who was willing to stand up to Thanos and defend his brother yet. They hadn't reached that point in the character arc. And we talked about this in the Loki episode if you want to go listen to that. But that was another way to get more Tom Hiddleston. He was supposed to be a one-off villain for the first Thor movie. And then he came back for Avengers, then Thor 2, then Thor 3, then Endgame. Like, they wanted as much Tom Hiddleston because he ended up being really good. It's a shame, I think, that they decided to kill him in Endgame for the emotional payoff, because we can still appreciate that. Okay, I take it back that it was a shame. It was creative, but was it good?
Yeah.
Not his death, but the then going back in time and making a branch timeline into Loki's TV show.
Yeah. I think here you're kind of getting back into what you were saying about how it's not necessarily that they want to kill off the character and then bring it back for the character, it's for the actor. They don't want to kill Tom Hiddleston because he's doing really good for Marvel. Mm-hmm. It's not Loki anymore. It's Tom Hiddleston that's doing really good for Marvel. And so killing him in Endgame, I think that was a good death scene, because it kind of the whole fan base loves Loki so much. There's a lot of boys and girls fangirling over Tom Hiddleston and Loki. Yeah. So not giving him a very significant death felt kind of fitting because you wanted more from him, right? Yeah. But then to kind of cater to the fans, they made Loki so that we could get more Tom Hiddleston because they knew that would make money. That's very clearly where it came from. And I will admit, I still did like the first season of the Loki. I haven't seen the second season yet, but I still think it was good. And I think it's just fan service, yes, but sometimes fan service is okay. I think of No Way Home. It was a lot of fan service in that movie, and they did a great job.
Yeah.
But I still have my gripes with it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have that nostalgia episode sometime in the future. But the problem that I see is that now they've developed Loki into possibly coming back to the main timeline. It's still a different Loki, and the sacrifice of Loki is still meaningful in Endgame or in Infinity War, but now it's a different Loki. Does that make it better or worse? Yeah. I don't know, and I think we'll see if they decide if he's going to come off of that. Oh, I guess I can't spoil season 2 for you. You should watch it, though. You should watch it. You should watch it. So, the other thing that I wanted to touch on for multiverse is Kang. And that's also controversial now because of what Jonathan Majors is going through, being fired from Disney and all that stuff because of the allegations. But Kang as a character has now been proven to be everywhere. The Council of Kangs at the end of Ant-Man, I believe, showed that there are millions of Kangs, especially ones that look like Jonathan Majors, funny enough. So they've dug that hole for themselves. But he's died twice, and technically a few more times if you count Loki season 2. But again, no spoilers for you. I actually want you to watch it.
I'm confused.
Does that convince you to watch it?
Yeah, a little bit.
You should watch it. He was defeated in Loki season 1, and then by ants in Quantumania. So now it feels, one, that he's not powerful because he's been defeated twice, and we're just supposed to be like, oh yeah, his other versions are more powerful. But that just makes it like, okay, you haven't shown me that. You've just said it and not proven it. So the deaths are actually more significant simply because you haven't proven that his death is. By the significance of those 2 deaths, it's significant because it's shown the insignificance of a Kang variant dying, right?
Yeah.
Do you concur?
Don't worry, I'm tracking. I concur.
Cool. I think as we finish up, I want to discuss some contradictions that I've had, or at least praises that we can attribute to. Another animated movie like How to Train Your Dragon that treated loss and death well, Big Hero 6.
Oh my word. They nailed it. They
did. Yes.
Great movie. His brother dying one of the saddest scenes I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. And then at the very end, losing Baymax in whatever that random realm multiverse area was that they ended up in. And yes, he built Baymax again, but it still was significant that it's not the same. He's starting from scratch with his friend. That's the loss, is that those adventures that the whole movie portrays are lost with that Baymax. And this Baymax that he recreates is just a from scratch healthcare robot.
You could argue that since the chip is the same, it's still the same like data, but it's still like not the same Baymax.
It's not the same.
Which another example just like that is Groot, where Groot dies.
I was going to bring this up.
Groot dies in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's growing again from just a stick, which impressive Wolverine type stuff. But it's not the same Groot anymore. In fact, he grows up to be a buffer Groot, which quite honestly I'm a bigger fan of the newer Groot character design. That can fly somehow, but that's a different.
Yeah.
In Volume 3 where he grew wings, that was
I remember that.
Other Groot couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I think Groot is also another one where it's like bring him back makes sense, but the loss is still there because it's not the same. It'll never be the same.
So why is it okay that we bring Groot back in that way and not Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark? Not that we can grow a Robert Downey Jr. from a little Tony Stark sapling.
Yeah.
But the bringing a character back, they could probably come up with a logical way that it's probably the multiverse. They could easily bring Tony Stark back from the multiverse, from a different universe, and have him continue in a role. And I think people would hate that because that would be an obvious undermining of what happened in Endgame. Whereas with Groot, one, we love it because we buy their merch and all of Baby Groot stuff that they wanted it for. But we accept that one and then say absolutely not with Iron Man.
I think we're talking about two deaths that were significant, yes, but one was so much more incredibly significant because of how big his role was. Iron Man was the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man was the first movie, not the first chronological. You know what I'm saying. But Iron Man was such a big character for him to die and to make the sacrifice play and the character development that's been happening. His death was like the climax of Marvel. Like you can't bring back a character who is at the top. He has to be holding that peak high, because if he comes back, it ruins Endgame. Whereas since it was the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, it wasn't paying tribute to all of the other movies happening before it. It's its own Guardians of the Galaxy. We are introduced to Groot in that movie, and he dies in that movie. So his death is significant, yes, because we love Groot, but it's not significant enough for him to not have a justifiable way to come back. You can bring him back without him affecting a whole multiverse.
What do you think about Yondu and his death?
I think it was very sad, and I think it was great. I think it was also well played, because if you brought him back, that would kind of get rid of the reason for all of the emotional trauma from Volume 2. Like, in order to keep Volume 2 being as emotional as it is, you need to keep him dead. Because if he comes back, once his death scene comes on, you feel nothing. It's like, oh, he comes back. It's fine. Everything gets resolved. A good story has resolve, but the resolve isn't quite the same as what it was before. So there's conflict, there's resolution, but the resolution is never quite 100%. It's better, yes, and the conflict is over, but at what cost? When you have that cost be someone like Iron Man or Yondu, the resolution is very satisfying, yes, but it leaves you kind of with something left. It just doesn't quite feel like this is it.
Yeah, I think the last one that I wanted to talk about, I'm sure there's way more that we could talk about and what would happen if they come back.
So much.
But I think one that is prevalent, especially in our favorite movies, superhero movies, with Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Now, Uncle Ben is more prevalent, but especially in No Way Home, they had that role transferred to Aunt May. And the passion behind Tom Holland playing that scene, especially the scene after where he reunites with his friends and then the other Spideys come and he's like just torn apart. And then those Spideys are consoling him with their experiences of them losing their Uncle Ben. And then in Across the Spider-Verse, we learn this new term called a canon event, and how Uncle Ben dying is a canon event for every Spider-Man, because that's what needs to happen to push them that next step of being more than a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, to be the hero that they need to be. And that was important, and possibly why Spider-Man is so popular. Not saying all his greatness comes from another person's sacrifice, but knowing that that's going to happen to every single Spider-Man was the driving force to Across the Spider-Verse.
And that's why it gets you so invested in Miles Morales' character, because can you imagine I love
words,
that
Josh,
concept.
words.
I'm sorry. I'm just getting so excited because I love those movies so much. They get you so invested in Miles' character because you're like, wait, hold up. It's like having. Can you imagine if you had a timer on a loved one's death? Like if I had pulled up my phone and it said 370 days, my dad is gonna die. I hope it's not 370 days. Actually, let's up those numbers a bit. But can you imagine? And then you're just sitting there like, I have to do something about this. You understand exactly where Miles is coming from. You don't want his dad to die, because his knowledge of it being a canon event for his dad to die is like, I have to do something about this. I've got to go against the grain, when he's already been going against the grain for this whole trilogy. It just gets you so much more invested because it's giving more significance to death before the death has even happened, which isn't something that I have seen in any other movie.
Keeping someone from death.
Keeping someone from death to the point where death has so much significance that it's like you're just on the edge of your seat, like, this cannot happen. Or actually, another example would probably be Kratos. Have you played God of War Ragnarok?
No, explain.
All right, do you care for spoilers?
I probably won't ever play it.
You won't ever play it? Okay. Well, there's a prophecy that Atreus, Kratos' son, is going to kill, or I guess the prophecy isn't that he's going to kill Kratos, but Kratos is going to die. And both Kratos and Atreus know this prophecy, but they don't know each other so they're doing everything they can to prevent this prophecy. And they're like, well, we can't do this. It kind of, in this world, destiny, it's a thing, and it's going to happen. So they keep on trying to prevent all of these prophecies from coming true, falling into the prophecy in the process. But then in the end, Kratos doesn't die, because there was a whole new destiny written for them by Kratos' wife. And the whole premise of going through so much toil to try and prevent a death, because death has significance, is such a cool story aspect for me. And I think that's also why I love the Spider-Verse, because Miles Morales cannot have his dad die. He cannot. Like, it's not an option for him. He's going to do whatever he can to prevent it. And that sort of passion, and that just the amount of work he's going to do for that is just so awesome, because death has so much significance, and it just is very full of emotion, and I love it.
I think Spider-Man stories get death right, in the sense that they understand that Uncle Ben cannot come back, or in Tom Holland's Spider-Man, that Aunt May cannot come back. Like, that is permanent for the sake of the character. And that, I think that might have been what Across the Spider-Verse was trying to say, is that the stakes are real. There is no, the universe is going to implode. Okay, when we talk about Across the Spider-Verse, it is a multiverse story that is personal. It is not the world, the universe, the galaxy is going to explode if you don't do something. It's that Miles is fighting his destiny, and he doesn't that's a way to write a multiverse story, is to make it personal.
And it's the trolley problem when you think about it, because if he does disrupt the canon event, it could lead a shift in the entire web or Spider-Verse collapsing, right?
Yeah.
Each chain killing trillions. So it's destiny is going to kill your dad, but if you switch the lever, it's actually going to kill everyone, with actually your dad included. It's like, would you do anything? Would you let it go? And it's, I think, playing with that kind of idea where it's just such a huge moral dilemma. It's like, do I save my dad? Can I save my dad? Is this something that can be done? And then wanting that reality so bad that you will do whatever you can to try and shift reality and change destiny at whatever cost. It's I could talk about Spider-Verse all day.
We'll get to it. I think the only other thing I wanted to say is, when you started talking about God of War, the only thing I could think of, because it's probably the only clip I've actually seen, is the fake out death when his fight against Thor, which is such a creative game decision.
Word, that's so cool.
Is to have you not is to have you fake die. It's as if you failed the level, and then in the cutscene in the splash screen saying, giving you a little hint, it's suddenly like.
Oh no. I say when we're done.
Like, man,
I got so many chills. I got so many chills from that. I think that's one of the most creative like ways to like continue a story and kind of breaking the fourth wall. That's like the coolest way to do it. More than just talking to a camera, it's like giving a death message and then being like, oh no, I say when we're done. And that just continuing the fight is so cool. A few other games have done that, and I can't think of examples here or right now, but I love it when they do that. I think it's cool.
It still has to give significance of death, but it shows that it's a creative way to avoid it in the moment. Like, obviously, that's closer to the beginning of the story, and it's just a lot more hitting when death is actually a threat.
And it's more just hitting, like, you as a player, because you're like, oh, no, I messed up. And then you're like, wait, no, I didn't mess up. This was part of the story.
It was meant to happen. Yeah.
The risk and reward is, like, I either have to play through that part of the story again, or you just keep going on with the story. So it doesn't have much risk in the story. That's so cool. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think how we want to finish this off is where we started, talking about how for us, death is not the end. For characters, maybe it should be for the sake of the story. But even for us, death is inevitable, but it's not the end. And that's the hope that we have as Christians. And God defeated death through sending Jesus to die and take that punishment. That's the gospel. And I hope that anyone who's listening takes that to heart and doesn't ignore that, because so many people live without hope. But we are people with hope for a better, not even a better future, just a better life, that this is not our home, that we are working for a greater glory, things that will make this life seem like dirty rags. So we look forward to that day.
It takes away a lot of the anxiety and the fear of this life too, knowing that it's not the end. There's comfort in knowing that there's more. And just as we know that there should probably be significance in death for a TV show, because you won't see that character anymore, but in real life, we don't have that significance of death. Yeah, it's a big part of your life because it's the end of it. It's not the end of your story. There's more. You're just entering a different chapter.
So we're contradicting our whole complaining this whole episode.
Yeah. Our whole complaint is we're saying death has to have significance. Death has to have significance. Well,
not really.
Not really.
Actually.
In real life. Actually, death has no significance over us.
It's a different type of insignificance, and that's important to distinguish. If you guys have more thoughts, we'd love to talk with you more in our Discord server, so go join us over there. Follow our socials on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Got a bunch of stuff over there. And then share this with your friends. Rate us 5 stars, and make sure you buy your merch, because that's out there. And
it exists.
It does. Anyways, Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Know that you are loved, and that there is a greater future for those of us in Christ. Peace.
Peace out, brethren.